Hey, good morning, afternoon, or evening, good people, wherever you are, wherever you happen to be, and however we're together. Thanks for being here. I'm Dave, and this is Dave's Head. So, what's in my head? If you Google, just go to Google and type the words Israel, Palestine, you'll get just over 1 billion with a B results. It'll probably take you the rest of your life and many more lives to go through every single result, just to actually see what the results are. You filter down on news only, that number comes down to about 19 million. Still a daunting task to go through and look at every single one of them. Now, I know this is a taboo topic, right? It's one of those things, if you're on the side of Israel, you got one group of people who's going to hate you and label you something. If you're on the side of Palestine, then a whole nother group is going to hate you and label you. Now, I don't pretend to know this vast, long duration history that exists between Israel and Palestine. I don't pretend to know it, don't pretend to understand it. We all know that history is written by the victors, and it doesn't necessarily mean that history is factual. So, based on the very, very emotionally charged two sides of this story, I can't say that I have a great understanding of why these two sides hate each other so much and the history behind it and who's actually telling the truth. Because you talk to either side, they both state claim and state their claim as factual. But we know this history is passed down, right? We know this. That history is passed down by the victor, and that history, passed down from generation to generation, loses its factualness, assuming it started in a factual way, over time. If you remember the gym class you had back in the day where you play that game, everybody's in a circle, you pass a word or a phrase to your right, and by the time you get to the end and come back around, it's a whole damn different phrase. That's kind of how history works, if it's allowed to operate that way. What I do know, and what I do understand in the sense of recognizing what's going on now, is that I'm one of those sappy human beings, right, that hates seeing people and children slaughtered over a land dispute, whatever the genesis of this is, religion dispute, if that's the genesis of what this is. And you know how I feel about religion. But still, to see children time and time again, and I can't remember a conflict that has so much visual documentation. I mean, every day you're seeing something posted on social media where someone's carrying a child, or a child is dead, or a person is dead, or bodies are here, explosions there, carnage everywhere. I don't remember seeing this near real-time social media redundancy of just carnage and sadness and inhumane in many ways. We're in this war games. If you remember the movie War Games way back in the day, we're living it now. We're in this war games age where you press a button, a missile is launched, X number of people are killed, desensitized reactions happen, if any, and we repeat. Right? Thousands of people are already dead. Thousands are already dead. Many, if not the vast, vast majority, innocent people caught up in this mess, just wanting to live their lives just like you and I do. And who knows how many more are going to die before this resolves itself. I mean, if you take a look around, I mean, there are ships and carriers coming in from everywhere. There's big planes full of ammunition and missiles coming in. There's no end in sight to when this is going to actually stop. But if you also look closely, you'll see that there are principles and parties existentially involved in this, right? Whether it's China moving their ships, or the U.S. sending their ships and sending their missiles, whether it's Russia doing this, Iran doing that. It makes me question, are the direct principles or the existential parties really interested in peace or a peaceful solution? Now, you can hate my answer all you want. It's 100% your right to not like my answer that I'm going to give, but I don't think anybody wants peace. I think war is profiting. I think war is political. I think war and death and carnage is part of the plan, because you have these conflicts. You have these people who are many times viewed as less than. And so them dying in thousands is not really a big deal. Protests in the streets here in the United States, sure, there's a subset of people who want this to stop. The vast majority of people are just going on with their lives. And so those who have the power to stop this have no vested interest in stopping this. If you look at the political side, there's no election consequences to not stopping this. Sure, there'll be some lost votes here because Israel's being supported. There may be some lost votes here because people look at Palestinians as actual humans, right? But is that going to change? This death that we see every day going to change anything? Are we going to one day wake up and there's a handshake going on in the Middle East? No, because that's not profitable, whether it's monetarily, power wise, business wise, strategic wise. I mean, it's just not. Think about the last time you, in your lifetime, heard that the Middle East was in a peaceful state. When's the last time? Where there wasn't some religion-based war going on, where there wasn't some race-based war going on, where there wasn't some just conflict war going on. Oil, nukes, allegedly, proven not to be true. But I honestly don't think the war profiters want to see war stop. Look at the stocks for some of the major companies that profit off of war. I'm not going to name them, but just look it up. Look at the stock the last 2 weeks, 3 weeks, whatever it's been, and look at their stock prices since this conflict started. Investors are going, yay, great, keep doing it. Because all they care about is the money. They don't care about the lives that are causing the stock price to increase. Let's just say lives are lost. But it's sad. It's really sad. I honestly have reduced my social media, which obviously I'm not promoting my podcast or my campaign that I'm running or anything as much as I should be, because I've kind of just detached from social media. Every single time I log into one of the social media sites that I use, it's right in your face. As someone who's powerless to do anything about it except use this mic, it's disconcerting. It's disgusting, number one. But it's also very just frustrating. It's very, very frustrating to see this and know you're powerless to do anything about it. To see children after children after children, parents after parents, families, whole families wiped out. And over what? Land that probably none of us own. I mean, none of us own this land on this world. None of us do. We make claims to it. Civilizations many, many hundreds of thousands of years ago fought wars over it. And so some truth, some fact, who knows? Who knows at this point? I'm the last expert on this conflict. And frankly, probably taking a risk even having a discussion about it, because like I said, it's so polarizing. If you're not supporting one, you're against that one. And it's just the way people are. I'm technically against both of them because they're killing innocent people. And so again, you can like my opinion, don't like my opinion. I'm disgusted with both sides. There's a lack of humanity, lack of care and concern for the lives being lost, just firing bombs and IEDs and all type stuff, just willy-nilly. Oh, we had a hospital day. That wasn't the intention. Sorry. Oh, okay. Yeah, we'll just excuse those 40 lives. It's okay. It's just 40 people. But they both done it. Killed innocent people. And it's frankly, it's just disgusting. And it's sad. It's disgusting. It's something that, wars in general, you wish would stop. I mean, what's a real legit reason for war and conflict these days? Like real legit. Land? Yeah. Religion? Yeah. Oil? A lot of that going around. It's disgusting. As a human and person who cares about humanity, it's just disgusting. That's really, I probably said that word 10 times at this point. It's just disgusting. And I wish somehow, if there's a Superman out there, Great time to fly down now and just wreck shop. Just destroy all types of shit. Every weapon on this planet. Just go around, lasers, speed of sound, speed of light, whichever one it is. Come on down. Destroy every weapon on this planet. And then we'll see how the big bad leaders of all these factions can actually do something when they have to stand there and fight like men. Which is one of the big problems I have with society today. A lot of gunplay, not a lot of fists, fights we used to do back in the day. You fight somebody, you have a disagreement, shake hands after the fight, move on. Just a different world. People rather pick up a gun, pick up a bomb, because they're cowards to be able to face their enemies or perceived enemies or somebody you have to disagree with face to face and resolve it like men, like women. Next thing that's on my mind is, for a long time, very, very long time, I've felt that both the political and criminal justice systems in this country are exclusive jokes. They're just ridiculous jokes. Neither unbiased, neither are blind. And you think the scales of justice, Lady Scale with the scales and the blindfold on. She's not blind. She's peeking like a motherfucker. But neither are fair and balanced, to steal a phrase from a news source. And neither really punishes bad behavior for everyone equally, fairly. Cue in cult leader Trump. It's almost getting to the point where I'm tired of talking about him, where I'm tired of him existing. And I don't wish death on anybody. And I'm not saying that's what I'm doing here. I'm tired of just him existing, honestly. And that's a very harsh way to put it, because there's so many people in this country who are just utterly brainwashed, infatuated, enamored, googly-eyed, like the old cartoons, like where the eyes pop out of their head and tongue drags on the ground. Like it's amazing to me how much bullshit he feeds people, and they swallow it up like they haven't eaten in 10 years, and that's the best roast beef on the plate. I mean, slurping down noodles and just spitting all over the place because they're sucking them in their mouth so fast. I mean, they take every single thing this man says in. But he's continuing to beat his cult over the head with lies and slander and temper tantrums because, like I said, they believe anything he says. And they believe nothing really factual that counteracts or contradicts what he says. And it's one of those things where, talking about facts in this country, we've gotten to a point, and if it feels like I'm complaining this episode, it's because there's a lot of shitty stuff going on in this world right now. And I'll talk about that a little bit, why I may be so grumpy, if you will, in my GRIN, which hopefully will cheer us up. But facts in this country took a shit, probably, now I've said this before, probably about a decade or so ago. When we got into the Obama candidacy years after the Bush 8 years, politics did a dramatic turn, like went off the road, mowing down cornfields, like just became a shitty mess. Look at what's going on in the House of Representatives right now with Republicans. They still can't. This is 2 episodes now we talked about this. They still haven't gotten a Speaker of the House. But Trump's got a bunch of cases against him, right? And this Georgia case has just taken a interesting turn because 4 people have now pled guilty to this RICO racketeering, defrauding the government of Georgia, state of Georgia, with regards to the election. So his former campaign lawyer, Sidney Powell, who somehow he said wasn't his lawyer the other day, but we all know she was, Kenneth Chesebro, who helped devise the fake electors plot, and the latest, his former campaign lawyer, Jenna Ellis, who boo-hooed in court when she had to make a statement and make her plea of guilty. She pled guilty to 1 count of aiding and abetting false statements, which is a felony. And she did implicate, hair dye guy, Rudy Giuliani, when she pled guilty. What's interesting, I think if I got this right, I believe she got 5 years of probation and a $4,000 fine. She has to agree to testify against, as all those guilty pleas have to agree to that so far. But speaking again about the criminal justice system and scales of justice and being blind, if you or I, and I'm saying you or I because I imagine most of my audience is in the same bracket or bucket as me, pled guilty to a felony charge, I really strongly doubt that the disposition of the court would be, hey, $4,000 fine, 5 years probation. I strongly doubt that would be the case. But the not so hidden secret in this country is that there are multiple classes of people in this country. There's that class with the fuck you money. They do what they want to. They say what they want to. They break rules. They do all the things. Even if they get caught, they don't get caught. There's the upper class of the country who they might get caught every once in a while. They may do some bad things every once in a while, but generally they can afford either the lawyers or their status on its own gets them felony disposition, like 5 years probation and $4,000 fine and a strong apology. Don't forget. So, believe it or not, I'm tired of Trump. I'm tired of Biden. I'm tired of the old white men mostly, but old men that don't want to give up their power in D.C., that cause mess after mess after mess. Do you realize we haven't had a balanced budget since the 90s, I think? We talk about picking ourselves off, by bootstraps and, entitlements and blah, 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 all the crap. Which, by the way, Social Security is not an entitlement. You pay into it. You're just getting it back. But we talk about all these things. This Congress hasn't balanced a budget since the 90s. That means every single year since then, the records don't reflect a plan of outflows and income that results in a net zero. At the minimum, at least just have a plan. There hasn't been one since the 90s. I'm also sick of the crazies, the batshit crazies in Congress. I'm not even going to mention their names. Y'all know them. Some of the most ridiculously ugly women in Congress, inside and out. And as I talked about before, the lack of factual standards in society today. Whether it's news media, whether it's talking head politicians, whether it's just simple conversations with friends and family. The ability to just tell the truth, relay facts, convey evidence, and have conversations rooted and based in the premise of we're going to have a factual conversation. Not conjecture, not, well, it's got to be. No, facts. Can you drop something on the table, tangible, factual, that says what you're saying is actually true? And that standard, that minimum standard, does not exist anymore. Go watch the news. Go watch whatever channel, Fox, MSNBC, CNN, NPR. Don't watch the crazy ones, the other crazy ones. But go watch the news and just count the number of stories and say one, either half an hour block if there's a host for half an hour block, whatever it is. And see how much actual evidence is presented for the stories that are being talked about. I'm not talking about interviews. I'm talking about evidence. Here's a document. Here's hard evidence. Here's this study. Here's this test result. And just watch how many stories they don't need anymore. All they have to do is say, hey, we've got our 4.7 rating for this hour. We know we got X number of people who we can parrot our stuff to. They'll believe it. But one of the things that's frustrating about this period of time that we're in, and I always say, we need to fast forward to the Star Trek time, because I'm a big Trekkie. Yes, I am. But, the Star Trek Next Generation, all that stuff, when society had evolved. You go back to Star Trek First Contact, which was the Next Generation's first movie in the theaters. And they were going back in time. Zefram Cochrane, I think, was the person that invented the warp drive. Yes, I'm a Trekkie. I told you that. And they were interacting with a couple people back then, try not to violate the Prime Directive. Go ahead and look it up. And there was an incident between Captain Picard and I forget the woman's name. She was a mother with Sanaa Lathan and Omar Epps in Love and Basketball. Can't remember her name, though. But talking about how the different things she was saying, we don't do that anymore. Captain was saying, we've evolved as a society. That's what I want. I want to fast forward me to the evolved society part, because I don't understand this. I hypothesize that it's really just rooted in selfishness, right? You get a politician who says and points out and indicates this is your pain point. And that's the person responsible for it. Only I can fix it. And this is all you should care about. And they repeat that for various topics. And so this topic may get 3 people. This topic may get 5,000 people. This next topic may get 10,000 people. And after a while, those numbers start growing. And they start believing that you are the one who's going to fix their life, make their life happier, do all these things. And those people over there, those are the ones who are making your life miserable. But this person right here has got our back. He's a man of the people or woman of the people. And all you have to do is pinpoint and target a pain point. Get someone to believe you got a solution to it and just keep hammering it home. Now, occasionally, if you can find something on someone, somebody missteps, trips, slips, busts a lip. That goes way back to the 90s, by the way. But if you find something you can use, oh, see, I told you. I told you they'd slip, trip, and bust a lip. I'm the one who can solve your problems. I'm the one that can heal your pain point. Because all they're going to do is slip, trip, and bust a lip, just like they just did. I told you. But it's sad for society. The alternatives from Trump, Biden, are not spit shined and good for humanity either in the U.S. They just aren't. And so what do? We've talked about before term limits. Congress is never going to vote for term limits by themselves, for themselves. Not going to happen. So how do we go about it? And I've proposed this many, many, many times before. Evict every single incumbent, election cycle after election cycle, until every single person is brand new. Doesn't matter who it is. Vote them all out. Make them earn your vote to come back. Introduce and get more third-party candidates. Make the Democrats and Republicans work for your vote. Because right now they don't have to. The Democrats have their base. Republicans have their base. Independents get squeezed. True independents get squeezed. But until we do something like that, it's not going to change. What's in My Head is brought to you in part by Digga Movers, your safe and swift moving company. An A+ rated one-stop shop licensed and insured moving company, providing local and long-distance services on the move. For more information, visit their website at www.diggamovers.com or call 1-888-77-DIGGA. That's 1-888-773-4436. The last thing that's on my mind are some firsts. And I promise you this portion is happier. On a positive note, I did 2 firsts since the last episode. 2 very amazing firsts, sort of. My first was I attended, like I told you, my first Alabama football game in Tuscaloosa. I'd seen my team play, my favorite college team play, multiple times, always at neutral sites. Atlanta, I think Texas one time. I'd seen them in neutral sites, and that's all I'd seen. Atlanta a bunch of times because they just, SEC. But I'd never traveled to Tuscaloosa to see a game. And I made it a point earlier this year on a kind of a whim. I said, hey, let me check the tickets. Because I'm bougie. My tickets were front row, down by the 10-yard line. But I needed to be in the action. I couldn't be, my first home game, I'm not going to sit up in the nosebleeds in the third row from the top. Just wasn't going to do it. But I got to walk into my college football mecca, right, for my favorite team. The second thing I did was I golfed in my first ever competition tournament. Now, I mentioned before that I retired from football. I hung up my cleats, hung up my gloves, put my football on a shelf. And thankfully I did, because now I got this foot issue that probably wouldn't let me play football anyway. But I golfed my first competition tournament ever. And so that was pretty cool. Now, Bama, I'll say, walking into the stadium, I kind of thought, maybe I might have a little tear shed, man tear, but I didn't. But it was as memorable as I thought it would be. I did say out loud that I want to come back to a night game. And here's why. This was homecoming. The opponent was Arkansas. You kind of expect, as a home team for homecoming, you expect to beat them. And so Arkansas hung tough and led for a little while, by the way. I was worried my first game was going to result in a loss, and I wasn't happy about that for a while. But it was a homecoming game, so it was homecoming atmosphere, laid back. And not saying that, the older people coming back is, listen, I'm an older person coming back, but not saying that older people coming back deflates the excitement a little bit, but it's not an LSU game at night. It's not a Georgia, which they probably would never play in Tuscaloosa anyway, probably be in Atlanta, but it's not a Georgia game at night. It's not an Auburn game at night. And so I want to come back to a night game, which will be an overnight thing because it's 3-hour plus drive to Atlanta where I stayed for that week. I just drove over for the game and drove right back. But I want that feeling. And I compare it to, I used to have Penn State season tickets. If you've ever been to a Penn State whiteout at night, the atmosphere is ridiculous. It's an amazing experience. If you've never done it, I highly encourage it. It's probably one of the top 10, easily 5, probably 2 or 3, more likely, college football environments to play in. When you got a Michigan or Ohio State playing, or even Maryland, because Penn State and Maryland have a little rivalry that goes way, way back. But when you got Ohio State, a Michigan coming in, and you have a whiteout for that game, that environment is ridiculous. And so I said I want to come back for an Alabama game at night. LSU, Auburn, maybe. I want to get that feel to compare it to Penn State with that feel. I know how that feels at Penn State. I want to compare it to Alabama. Golf, now, there's an app called GRIN. GRIN allows you to track your scores while you're golfing around, that type of thing. But they also have location-based qualifying leagues around the country. And so you play in, say, Pittsburgh, New Jersey, Philadelphia, Tucson, Dallas. You get the point. And you play through a season, and you get points that qualify you for national type of events. And so I played in the 2024 season opener this past Sunday, and I did not perform as well as I wanted to. Factually, I came in next to last. Now, I fought hard to not come in last. I said I'm not going to come in last for my first tournament, but I did come in next to last in my group bracket based on handicaps. So you have different brackets based on handicaps. So I will say, and I don't do excuses, but I hadn't played since August, and so I recognized that I was going to be rusty. And so the day before, Saturday, I went and did a practice round, and that was rusty. That was rough. But I had some good shots, but I knew going into Sunday, I needed to clean up a lot of things in a hurry, or it was going to be a rough day. And so I needed to make sure that I, next time I'm a little more seasoned, mid-season form, as opposed to coming off almost 3 months. This is October. Almost 3 months of not playing golf, walking up to a golf course and trying to play. But I had an amazing time. Met people, obviously, I didn't play before or know before, and got paired with them. We had a nice conversation throughout the round. Good time. Didn't win a trophy. Did get a gift card. I got to check that out. But it's a nice, cool activity. Golf is my sport of choice now. Like I said, I'm not playing football. And so having this opportunity to do competition stuff in theory, will only make me better. And since I don't like losing, because it's one thing to go out, play foursome, with 3 of your best, good friends or whatever, and you come in third or second or even win. Or maybe even fourth, but you still play a good round. Not really sweating that overnight. But when you're in a bracket of people in a tournament, a competition tournament with trophies and dollar values for prizes, and you come in next to last, it's a little motivating to get your ass out there, practice on a range, all that stuff. Because I probably, I know I'm better than I performed. I probably gave away 10 to 12 shots, which would have won me the tournament if I could have did that. I only came in fourth by about 6 strokes. And I know I gave away on bad shots or miss hits more than that, almost double that, if not more. And so I've got some motivation for the next time I play, which is the point of what I'm saying. So I had a pretty good time since my last episode. Getting to spend time with my bestie down in Atlanta, hanging out with her, catching up with my friend that I grew up with. We grew up in the same block. Got to catch up with her. I found an Eagles bar to watch the Eagles lose their first game of the season to the Jets. Had some great food. Got to hang out with my cousin who lives down there as well. I try to see as many people as I could, but listen, I know too many people down in Atlanta and I can't see them all. And so between seeing Bama and golfing, those are two firsts that were just really amazing bucket list items, so to speak, that I'm happy I got to participate in. And despite everything going on in the world, having the time and the ability to do those things, to channel a religious word, is a hell of a blessing. That's what's in my head. So, sexism is defined as prejudice, stereotyping, or discrimination, typically against women, on the basis of sex. EverydaySexism.com, a website for, quote, the Everyday Sexism Project, exists as a vehicle to, as they say, catalog instances of sexism experienced on a day-to-day basis. Now, this is focused in the UK, but obviously we have a focus on this in the US as well. And so Pew Research Center did a study back in 2017 entitled Gender Discrimination Comes in Many Forms for Today's Working Women. A survey of 4,914 adults, 4,702 of them designated themselves as either employed at least part-time, which I think those designations are important when you do surveys. But anyway, so some of the things they came out with: 42% of women, 22% of men, 57% of those with postgraduate degrees that are women, and 39% of those who had any college experience or got a bachelor's say they have faced discrimination on the job because of their gender. 25% of women, 5% of men, 35% at post-grad, 20% at college say they earn less than a man or woman doing the same job. 23% women, 6% men, 30% postgraduate, and 20% of collegiates say they were treated as if they were not competent. 16% women, 5% men, 29% postgrad, and 12% of collegiates say they experienced repeated small slights at work. Now, they didn't define what small slights mean, because I know working in IT, we kind of do stuff all the time. We say some smart, sarcastic stuff all the time. But both sexes seem to agree that harassment is a problem in the workplace. 36% of women, 35% of men, just generally. But women have, according to this survey, 3 times more likely than men to have personal experiences with it in the workplace, 22% to 7%. Now, difference between agreeing there's something going on versus actually personally experiencing there. Now, break it down, because we always do, break it down by race. 53% of black, 40% of white and Hispanic. 40% both white, 40% Hispanic. And also, got to put politics on it these days. 48% of Dem-leaning independents say they've experienced some sort of sexism in the workplace. 33% of Republican-leaning independents said the same thing. Last thing, in a 2018 New Science article called The Origins of the Patriarchy, I'm going to butcher this name and I apologize, Anil and Natwami, got to look it up, and Kate Douglas, 2 very competing last names, right? Say male rule started 12,000 years ago when we moved from being hunter-gatherers to farmers. And the idea that they put, this very lengthy article if you want to read it. But the idea they said was we went from hunters to farmers, and in order to protect your farm, the more stronger species or men had to do so, and the women left their families and started living with the men, and so they had their roles as well. They said it started 12,000 years ago. Shirley Chisholm, and I'll end with this, once said, quote, the emotional, sexual, and psychological stereotyping of females begins when the doctor says it's a girl. A lot to take in there, right? But we're talking about sexism. We're talking about all this because I have an interesting guest for this episode, Jack Kammer. A little bit about him. He's a, quote, counter-feminist social worker, and we're going to find out what that means. He's a champion to me, just reading his background, champion to illustrate social issues of men and boys and the problems that result from ignoring them. He's also done radio. He's got books. We're going to talk about all that stuff. But welcome to Dave's Head, Jack. How's it going?
It's going real well, Dave. Pretty good introduction there.
Thank you. I bombarded everyone with stats. A lot to take in there. But I do thank you for stepping into Dave's Head, as I always do with my guests before we get into it. And I know I kind of introduced you a little bit there. I like to have my guests introduce themselves. So take a moment, tell the people who you are, what you do, and what you're about.
Okay, thank you. So counter-feminist, what's a counter-feminist? A counter-feminist is distinct from an anti-feminist because an anti-feminist listens to feminists talk about sexism against women, and an anti-feminist will typically say, no, that's a bunch of baloney. Women have it easy. No such thing as discrimination against women. They're actually on a pedestal. A counter-feminist, on the other hand, doesn't say no. A counter-feminist says, yeah, and. Yes, and. We've been talking about sexism against women for 50, 60 years, and even Betty Friedan in the 1980s, the woman who started it all with her book, The Feminine Mystique, said the dialogue has gone on too long in terms of women alone. Let's let men join women at the center of the second stage. So the end is, yes, there is sexism against women, but guess what? The most sexist idea of all is the belief that only one sex is harmed by sexism. The most sexist idea of all is that only one sex is sexist. Men are sexist and women are harmed by sexism. That's the most sexist idea of all. Women, too, are sexist, and men, too, are harmed by sexism. We don't talk about the second part of this problem. And that's why it seems to me, and I think to a lot of people, that it's really only getting uglier and uglier. And we're not really making the progress we need to make to create equality of opportunity for both sexes in every sphere of life. So that's a quick introduction of me. Does that help any? Is that good?
Sure. Absolutely. So I do want to dive in a little bit to what you said. You made a distinction, and I think it's an important one, between a counter-feminist and an anti-feminist. I take it that you've had to come to that conclusion because of some of your discussions over the years have led people to believe you're more anti than counter.
Well, if the definition of sexism, and I think you gave one that said particularly as it affects women, is sort of mild, because there are definitions of sexism that say, discrimination against women, make no allowance for any possibility of sexism against men. So I do not deny that there is such a thing as sexism against women. It's pretty clear, pretty obvious if you paid any attention at all with any kind of an open mind to the problems that women have talked about that they face because they're women. You'd be crazy to say there's no such thing as sexism against women. On the other hand, I'm on a crusade to make it so that people who say there's no such thing as sexism against men are also viewed as crazy, because it's everywhere. We just don't articulate it. We don't have words for it. Your introduction, very understandably, talked about the workplace. Mm-hmm. Well, that's not where you're going to find a lot of sexism against men, although you will find some. Sexism against men isn't happening primarily in the workplace. It's happening outside of the workplace. It's happening in the domain that women have controlled, that men want equal access to. And that domain is the domain of love, the big red heart, family, relationships, parenting, expressiveness, having people treat you with empathy when you have a problem as a man, rather than saying, oh, poor baby. What's the little baby crying about now? Which is, very common. Let me take out my little tiny violin for the man. It's really pretty mean and ugly in some ways, because there's a lot of power these days in being the victim of sexism, and women have got a lock on that big time, and they get a lot of bennies, a lot of consideration, because it's perceived that they are very vulnerable to sexism. Well, men deserve and can use some of that too.
Yeah, could we also add to that, and what are your thoughts on this? The justice system, whether it's criminal justice, family justice. Yeah. Could we add that to the list? And I think I agree with most of the points that you made, but what I'm adding there is the courts. I think one of the areas that there's a huge benefit is the court system. What do you think about that?
Yes. I worked for National Fatherhood Initiative, for a year, where I was a trainer for NFI, National Fatherhood Initiative, on primarily on its Inside Out Dad program, which is a program for incarcerated fathers to help them maintain relationships with their kids while they're locked up. So I got to hear stories from these fellas about, how they are second-class parents at best. That didn't cause them to get locked up, but it does, in many ways, I think, get them locked up again. Because, they get out of jail, they get out of prison. The criminologists and the sociologists know that one of the best predictors for keeping a man out of prison once he's been released is that he have strong, solid family relationships, people who care about him, and people who care about him in a way that he knows he is cared about. Because if a man doesn't feel cared about, and he's only cared about for how much money he brings home, and he doesn't have any money because he went to a rotten high school, maybe didn't even get past 8th grade, can barely read because of the rotten schools he went to, doesn't have any skills, he lives in a depressed area. And if he's only valued for how much money he's got and he doesn't have any, he's going to make money by any means necessary, because it hurts so much to be nothing, to be completely disregarded by the people whose love you want, by the people whose respect you want. I was also, for a year, a parole and probation agent in central Baltimore. You're in Philly, Baltimore's not far away, and similar problems. Yeah. And I had some pretty tough guys in my office crying because they could not catch a break. Now, I was known as an agent who cared about my guys. It was mostly men. I was known as an agent who cared about my guys. No doubt some of them were playing me. I know that. But most of them weren't. Most of them knew that I cared about them. I felt for them. I felt their pain. I was empathetic to what they were going through. Look, can I say a 4-letter word?
Absolutely.
On your podcast? Okay. You tell me if I'm right or wrong about this. I believe it's true up and down the East Coast and probably in other parts of the country where I haven't been yet to ask the question. But in Baltimore, when I ask men, so when you were growing up, did you ever hear black men ain't shit? And what do they say? They say all the time. Mm-hmm. All the time. And they aren't hearing that from the Ku Klux Klan. They're not hearing it because they're black. They're hearing it because they're male. And that is about as sexist as you can get. And you take the double whammy that a black man gets. He's no good because he's black. He's no good because he's male. That's a formula for disaster. And I think we're seeing it all over the country. In courts, if a woman cries and says, "Oh, I was afraid of him," or "He made me do it," or the man might be on charges for trying to get drugs because the woman sort of forced him to. If you ever want to see your kids, you'll get me the drugs I need. That's just an example of how men are set up to commit crimes by proxy. There are lots of stereotypes about men, many of them negative, and many of them feed into this idea that men are guilty. If there's a disagreement between a man and a woman, who's going to say, "Oh, I believe the man is a better person than that wonderful, loving, sweet, kind, angelic woman"? It's it's sexism.
And I have personal experience with that type of situation. Actually, once in college and once a couple years ago. One totally didn't have anything to do with me. I just was in the wrong space at the wrong time. Unfortunately, that worked itself out. The other one, not so much because of that very thing. It's his word against her word, and who's going to believe the guy. A couple years ago, way back in 2001, I think it was, I had a very similar situation, except she told the truth. And so my story was told. The police asked me what happened, and she actually told the truth, which was very surprising in that moment. The second situation, the other person lied, and of course they believed her. And so, talking about the court system, is it the law structure the way it's set up, or is it that this has been going on for so long, it's just a standard at this point that you have situations like that where a woman is believed first, regardless of how realistic or truthful her story is?
To tell you the truth, I don't think it's either of those two. I think those two options that you mentioned were very powerful years ago. I mean, they still are powerful. But what's really more powerful now, I think, is the politics of it all. Because there are organizations around the country of people, mostly women, concerned about domestic violence. And they don't want to hear, they do not want to hear that it goes both ways. They don't want to hear that women are ever violent. They are very concerned about the quote-unquote toxic masculinity and the patriarchy and male power and control, and they don't want to hear anything about women as human beings also wanting some power and control in their lives. So these organizations will sit in courtrooms during the hearings on domestic violence cases. A woman wants a protective order, or the man is in danger of going to jail. And especially if he's on parole and probation. Oh my God, he's, violated like that. In the interest of public safety. He's skating on thin ice being on parole and probation. He's terribly vulnerable to being violated and sent back to prison. And that's a lot of power to give to a woman. She knows all I got to do is call up Mr. Parole and Probation agent. He hit me. What are you going to do about it? Well, you're going to violate him. That's what my boss told me to do. In the interest of public safety, write him up. And he goes back to jail. So I think politics has got a lot to do with it. It's just very hard for any official these days to dare to say, well, let me hear both sides of this story. And it's very difficult for anybody in position of authority these days, and I'm thinking here of judges, to say, I've been on this bench for about 18 years, and, this is a he said, she said thing. And I can't prove that the woman's lying, but the best guess I have is that she is. And on the basis of that, I am going to not convict this man and send him to jail. I am not going to give you this protective order and have him removed from the household forthwith, where he gets 6 hours to pack up his stuff and get out of there, even if his kids are living there. Especially because the judge doesn't know for sure. And God forbid he denies a woman a protective order and then she gets hurt. He's gone. He's gone because the politics of this situation are so bad and so unforgiving and so black and white that believe the woman. It used to be said when you were an IT person, nobody ever got fired for buying IBM because it was, solid, rock solid. And even if it turned out not to be the best product, you're not going to get fired for buying IBM. Well, if you're a judge, you're not going to get fired for locking a man up. You're not going to get fired for buying her story. The politics of this, the zeitgeist, the spirit of the time is just very protective of women and very dismissive of men. We're just disposable. And it shouldn't be that way, but it is. And I believe, and you might want to talk about this better than I can, I believe that's a really bad problem in the black community.
No, I want to the reason I brought that up was I have personal experience with that, but also I've seen it time and time and time again where situations like that, whether it be family court with the children involved or domestic situations as well, where it's just assumed, and people outside of the court system know the truth, but they can't bring the truth to the court, which is, it's one of those tough situations to be in, and it's, somebody who's been through it. I don't wish that on anybody, just because there's a bit of a helpless feeling to know that there's a truth out there that you cannot communicate, you cannot get across to those with the power to do something about it. You touched on toxic masculinity. I want to talk about that and toxic femininity. Can you talk about what each of those are, and the there's not really a positive to either of them, but why they're so bad?
Well, when you say toxic femininity to me, the first thing that comes to my mind is wrong unit of analysis. It's the wrong unit of analysis to look at masculinity as what's toxic. The way it looks to me is that we ought to recognize that because of sexism in our culture, expectations of what men are supposed to be and do, and how they're supposed to be and do what they're supposed to do, because of those expectations, which require you to be tough and bad and compete and fight and never let anybody disrespect you, and if you do, you're a chump and nobody's going to want you if you don't have a lot of money. That, to me, is a polluted lake. And we ought to be talking about the polluted lake, the toxic lake, rather than the fish that are being told to swim in that lake. We shouldn't be talking about the toxic fish. We should be talking about the toxic lake. And we shouldn't be talking about toxic masculinity. We should be talking about the toxic culture that treats men as badly as it does.
Oh, that's a powerful answer. When we talk about toxic, and I have my love-hate relationship with the word toxic, by the way. I feel like it's way overused for so many situations these days, but it's very appropriate for many others. But when we think about answers, right? Like you said, I'm an engineer, I'm in IT, so we're always thinking about the problem-solving aspect of this. What is something practical we can do? And I'm going to use the word heal because I feel like a lot of healing has to happen in this situation. But what are some practical things we can do to heal this situation, to remove this toxic environment that we have, and to have people, regardless of their gender, treated more fairly?
So what counter-feminism does is to say, yes, gotcha. Now, would you be willing to listen to how sexism affects men without thinking that I must be saying that sexism doesn't affect women? And if the woman says, I'm not interested in hearing anything about how bad men have it because only women have it bad, then I don't even try. But there are women who know things are bad, things are wrong, things aren't good. There are women who know that women ain't angels. Women are not always perfect, especially, if they're mothers and they see what happens to their sons or their grandsons. Women see what happens to their brothers, what happens to their fathers. There's plenty of good women out there, but they're not the squeaky wheels. They're not the ones who are well-funded and have big organizations of professional feminists backing them up. They're just good people. So what needs to happen is for men to be willing to say various simple things. Could be as simple as hearing a bunch of women talking and dissing men. Just saying, hey, hold on a second here. I really don't appreciate that. You're talking about all men, And that's sexism. You don't want to be stereotyped as a woman. I don't want to be stereotyped as a man. And let's take a look at the stereotypes of women anyhow. Let's take a look at the stereotypes of men anyhow. How many of them are really true to the vast majority of men? So that's one thing, just standing up, just being willing to say, I don't appreciate that. Other little simple steps are, let me just tell you how I feel. Let me just tell you how I feel. Because if you really know what you feel, you're never wrong. Nobody can make you wrong. They can try to make you wrong. Oh, you shouldn't feel that way. But I do. But I do. Let me tell you how what you're doing here makes me feel. You don't like being disrespected at work. You don't like having your boss disrespect you. I don't like having my wife disrespect me. I don't like it when my wife says, when we're having a thing about how to raise the kids, I don't like it when my wife says, well, I'm the mother. I'm the mother. You're just, you're just that other thing. That to me is the crux of the issue. Because, as I mentioned, you started the show with your introduction about in the workplace. Okay, well, that's what feminists want to talk about. They don't want to talk about where they are the bosses. They don't want to talk about the advantages they have at home. If I had to pick which insult I would like to be labeled with, two choices. Jack, you're not very good at math. Or, Jack, you're not a very kind, caring, and loving person. Which would I rather have as the insult that gets hung on me? Okay, I'll take, I'm not bad at math. I do not want to hear, because it serves your purposes, that I don't have a clue about how to raise kids, and that my approach to raising kids is wrong because it's not the same as yours. You know how women say, oh, the world would be so much better if women ran the world. If women were in charge of international relations, we'd never have any more wars. Maybe
I have heard that before.
Fewer. Yeah. Maybe we'd have a few fewer, but I think really what we'd have is they'd just be kicked down the road, kicking a can down the road, because some problems just have to be solved in very forceful ways. But I'll even grant that maybe women's style would be nicer. If women could all get together, they wouldn't, puff up like they got to be tough guys, because we do have to puff up to be tough guys because we're supposed to. It's what men get respected for.
Well, let me interrupt just for 1 second.
Yeah.
Let me interrupt for 1 second. Let me let's slide back to your question, because I was thinking about that, whether we said that I'm not good at math or I'm not a good person. And this is probably because of my personality and how I am. I'd actually prefer that you said I wasn't a good person, only because to me that's an opinion, right? That's not something that's based on fact. It's based on either feelings, emotion, hearsay, whatever. Where math is an application of my intelligence, right? That's an application of my work ethic. It's an application of actually who I am as a person. More so than some arbitrary opinion about me being a good person. But that's just me personally. I was just sitting there thinking.
No, that's good. No, Dave, that's good. That's good. You're an engineer, right? Yeah. And you want data. You want data, and you want facts, and you're objective. But if you knew that 1,000 people are out there who just believe what they hear and really aren't into science and data and technology, and they're very influenced by influencers, right? If you knew that 1,000 people out there, 1,000 people that you might run into in your day, or in your month, thousands, a lot of people, and if you were told, I'm going to tell 1,000 people, I'm going to convince 1,000 people that you're not good at math, or I'm going to convince 1,000 people that you better stay away from Dave. because he's mean. He doesn't care about anybody but himself. And oh my God, his poor kids. And if I was the judge, I'd take him away. And, you know, people even willing to testify. Yeah, I saw Dave do something once around his kids. That was mean. It was mean. You know, if a woman loses her temper one time, oh, well, she had a rough day. If Dave loses his temper one time, well, it's because he is essentially a bad person.
A violent person.
He's a man. He's a man. It's the essence of who he is. So, and also you might not want to be labeled as bad at math because it's like central to your livelihood, right?
Well, yeah, absolutely.
So, yeah. So, but me, my livelihood is not based on me being good at math. So, you want to say I'm not good at math? That's fine. I don't really care. But if you tell me I am no good, I'm a mean person, I should be locked up, I don't know how to be around kids, that's what would hurt me. That's the kind of sexism that hurts me. Let me go back to the earliest thing I remember as a kid about sexism against me. I didn't realize it at the time, and it probably took me 25, 30 years to realize it. But you know how bad it is if you see a little girl who's good at sports, or a little girl who's good at science or math, you don't say to the little girl, gee, you're really good at sports for a girl. You don't say, gee, you're really good at math for a girl. Because the message there to that little girl is, what are you doing being good at math? That's not what girls do. You're going to be a freak. Now that's hardly the case anymore because girls are encouraged to be whatever they want to be. And there's organizations about girls who code and STEM programs, getting girls interested in science, technology, engineering, and math. But even today, with all of that going on, you know that would just be sort of a rude and stupid thing to say to a girl. You're really good at math for a girl. What I used to hear as a little boy was, gee, Jack, you're really good with babies for a boy. What was the message there? The message there is, man, this isn't for you, man. Just like the little girl was told, leave it to the boys to be good at science, technology, engineering, and math, and to be good at sports. Leave that for the boys, because if you really want to be a girl, the way a girl ought to be, you'll play with dolls. Mm-hmm. And Jack, if you really want to be a boy, the way boys are supposed to be, you'll be out there fighting every second of every day and, doing whatever they think boys are supposed to be doing. I love babies. They were so much fun. and they liked me. Mm-hmm. And to be growing up in a culture where that's for somebody else and not for me, I knew something was wrong. I also remember very early on seeing fathers get up every morning and leave the house and get in the car and drive to some train station somewhere and ride this train for 35 minutes into the city, ride an elevator and do something at work, and then come home, backtracking all of that stuff, and coming home tired at the end of the day and not being with their kids all day. Mm-hmm. I said, that does not look good to me. I do not want that in my life. And so what I knew I wanted in my life was a way to make some money, because everybody needs to, but not 80 hours a week. Mm-hmm. And when I hear about work-life balance, first thing I know is, before women got into business and careers big time, there was no such phrase as work-life balance. Mm-hmm. Men just went to work and that was what they did. And they came home tired and grumpy and they made money. They didn't worry about a work-life balance. Women, on the other hand, they said, I want it all. And men ought to have exactly the same work-life balance that women do. Because although we are somewhat different as men and women, we are a whole lot more alike. And men's humanness needs to be a lot better respected than it is. And take a look at the problems that arise from men being stressed out over money, not having the ability to express themselves, not being heard, not having anybody being empathic with them. One of the main reasons I think men don't talk, which I think is unfortunately true, but not because we don't want to talk. One of the reasons we don't talk is that people don't want to listen. Because if they really wanted to listen, to what most men's lives are like, they would feel bad. And they don't want to feel bad. It's much better, much easier for them to believe what they're told. Oh, it's a man's world. Those men have it so lucky. Mm-hmm. Look at all the money they make. Don't ask where it gets spent. Just look at how much they're making.
Yeah.
It's got to change. It's got to stop.
Yeah, and to answer the question of the man who stressed out, works hard, works all these hours, is the reason life expectancy for a man is way less than a woman. But to your point about work-life balance, it's interesting because I got into my career back in 1999, right before really the tech boom and social media boom and all that stuff, and working from home was prevalent. That all those things came way after that. And you're right about work-life balance, because I don't remember that being a term really used until mid-teens, I think, somewhere around there. It definitely wasn't in the 2000s. It was 2010 and 2020. I think that term really came out of there. And it's interesting. You look at some of the, to your credit, to your point, some of the victories, if you will, that men have gotten. The paternity leave that's granted to men now. So that allows men to be home when the wife has a baby and all that stuff. But work-life balance is probably, and I haven't thought of this until this conversation, probably one of the better examples as far as a workplace where once we've gotten more level with, women's salaries, position, title holding, working from home environments, that's something that's kind of come a little closer as far as feminism, masculinity, those types of things. But looking at this particular issue of sexism and just introducing this aspect of it, if you look at racism, look at sexism, where women are prototypical victims of sexism, black people are prototypical victims of racism. Does this kind of parallel the argument that when you have the counter argument, I should say, for racism, that white people can suffer racism as well? Is that kind of similar to a man saying men can suffer from sexism as well?
All right, it's a really good question, and it comes up a lot. The idea is that a men's movement is as stupid as a white people's movement. Now, I think that it would be it would be hard for me to get excited about a white people's movement. The difference, but I'm not at all, I don't find it at all difficult to get excited about a men's movement. The difference is that there are advantages and disadvantages on both sides of the male-female divide. Mm-hmm. There are disadvantages to being a woman. There are advantages to being a woman. There are advantages to being a man. There are disadvantages to being a man. And so if we just focus in our discussions of sexism on women's disadvantages and men's advantages, we're talking about half of the problem. Mm-hmm. That is not the situation facing blacks and whites, because there are no traditional benefits to being black in America, for sure. I mean, there's no traditional advantages to being black. There are plenty of traditional advantages to being white. And so for blacks to say, we'd like to have some of the privileges and benefits and advantages that white folks do, that makes a lot of sense to me. Now, white people can say, well, we need a white people's movement because those black people are getting too many rights and privileges too fast. They're getting too much equality too fast. I don't get excited about that. So to me, it's not at all the same as saying that it's not sensible to say the men's movement is as stupid as a white people's movement. The dynamics between the two groups are not the same.
No, it makes sense. And I think to your point earlier, and putting all four of those categories, men, women, white, black, in one box, if you have like the biggest negative, black man, probably the biggest positive would be white woman, probably, if you look at that quadrant.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's a good point. That's a really good point. I would put white women, I'm glad you mentioned white women, because everybody typically would say, well, it's white men are at the top. Mm-hmm. Depends on what you're interested in having in your life. I think white men and white women are at the top. I do think that black women are below white people, but I think they're above black men.
Okay.
That's just the way it looks to me. But
I wasn't planning on asking that, but it kind of led to that. It popped in my head. I was like, we're kind of talking about four things, and we put them in a quadrant or ranked them. So you're saying white women, white men, but just barely a gap, and then black women, bigger gap, and then black men, bigger gap.
Yeah. That's the way it looks to me. Because sexism against men has not been addressed. And sexism against women has been addressed. So the burden of sexism that black women face is a lot less these days than the burden of sexism that black men face. So, racism affects black women and black men, but sexism today is much more of a burden for black men than it is for black women. My opinion, my view, my experience. But as an outsider.
Got you. Last topic for this segment. Let's talk about your book, Goodwill Towards Men. Women talk candidly about the balance of power between the sexes. Why did you write it? What do you hope the audience or anyone that reads it gets out of reading it?
Well, the book was published in 1994, so it's way back there. Why did I write it? Because I used to be real optimistic.
Are you saying you lost all optimism at this point?
Well, no. Remember what you asked me about, what needs to happen to heal this mess. And I talked about, one of the things that you got to do is talk to women. And there are a lot of good women out there, and I know that. So Goodwill Toward Men was based on that sense of optimism. That nobody really wants to hear men talking about sexism against men. And nobody really wants to hear men talking about women's advantages as women. But I know there are good women out there who are ready, willing, and able to talk about the advantages they have as women and the disadvantages men have as men. And I interviewed 22 women, most of whom consider themselves feminists, who are ready to talk about the piece of the puzzle that wasn't being talked about. So my editor, during the construction of this book, would return chapters to me with notes saying things like, I am incredibly excited about this book. And this is a veteran editor at St. Martin's Press, which is one of the major New York publishing houses. And this guy was, he graduated from Princeton, and he knew what he was doing. He was a smart man, and he was getting excited about this book. I was getting excited too, because he was excited. And so I spent a year and a half. They gave me a $17,000 advance. This was back in 93, 94. It was tough to get through a year and a half with that 17K. Plus I was traveling, flying around the country to interview some of these women in person. But we put the book together. And there's a lot of nice blurbs about it, you know, a lot of nice praise for goodwill toward men. Well, the book came out. The director of publicity, a wonderful woman, got me on to the Today Show with Bryant Gumbel. So that was pretty cool. But that was about the only good piece of publicity I got. Not because the publicity director wasn't trying to do her job, but because the staff of St. Martin's Press, most of whom are the bad kind of feminist, were saying things like, oh, it's just a bunch of women sitting around talking. Just sort of dissing the book. And they sort of refused to work on it, to market it. I got the book to the manager of the flagship bookstore at Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore, where I live. The manager of the flagship store for all of Barnes & Noble's college bookstores. He got the book, he read it, he loved it. He let me know that he would do anything he could to help me promote this book to all of the college bookstores that are in the Barnes & Noble chain. Well, I let the staff people at St. Martin's Press know about this. Hey, we got a great opportunity to sell some books here. Didn't do a thing. Did not do a thing to reach out to that man to try to sell books. That's just an example of how they killed the book. Because I think it was too good of a book, because it was too clearly true that we need to talk about not just women's disadvantages and not just men's advantages. We need to talk about the other side of the coin. They couldn't bear it. They couldn't stand it. But the book died. So I published it on Amazon through Kindle Desktop Publishing. So
okay.
That's where that book is. That's why you never heard of that book.
Okay. Actually, when I did my background research, I saw that this book was out there, but I didn't see, when I saw it on Amazon, I just wanted to ask about it.
Yeah, it's because I published it myself, but you know, I don't have any marketing clout, and I don't even like marketing, and I don't even like social media. I just don't like to do it.
Gotcha.
Gives me the creeps.
Gotcha.
Well, and then I wrote a book. Dave, let me mention the second book I wrote. So after the people at St. Martin's Press killed my book that I had spent a year and a half on, after they killed it and destroyed my illusion that this book was going to do well, not just being sold and making some money, it was going to do some good because, wow, we're going to really talk about what really goes on between men and women, not just one side of it. So I was a little disappointed. And you might even say angry about what happened to me and my book. Wasn't much I could do about it. But a few years later, I just started feeling like I got to write something else about this book. I just got to write something else about this set of issues. And so I wrote a book called If Men Have All the Power, How Come Women Make the Rules? You know, if men have all the power at this publishing company, how come the women, you know, the supposedly powerless women, how come they're making the rules? Plus, I found on the bulletin board of a high-ranking woman where I was working in D.C., on her bulletin board, she had a piece of paper called The Rules. And it was, you know, the kind of stuff you would expect a sexist woman to say. The woman is always right. If the woman is ever wrong, it's because there's a misunderstanding, something that the man doesn't understand. You know, just that kind of stupid stuff. Plus, there was a book called The Rules that was a bestseller around that time. And The Rules was a book written by two women who were telling other women how to manipulate a man into marrying you. You know, treat him like, basically the idea was treat him like shit, and he'll just fall in love with you and have to have you. So, with all of these ideas about the rules and women making the rules, but pretending they don't have any power, I wrote a book called If Men Have All the Power, How Come Women Make the Rules? I found an agent in New York to try to publish it. She couldn't find anybody to take it. No publisher, no editor would go for it. One of the editors was a man, vice president of something, pretty big, high up guy at Warner Books. And he wrote to my agent and said, I wasn't crazy about the one-liner approach because I wanted this book to be really pithy, just something easy for men to read. Bang, 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 bang. I wasn't crazy about the one-liner approach, but there is a lot of truth at the heart of this. But I'll let one of my competitors, but the amount of ire this book would stimulate among the women in-house, he's thinking about his underlings too, his administrative people. The amount of ire this book would stimulate among the women in-house would be enormous. I'll let one of my male competitors be the one who gets pummeled. Again, powerful man, and he's got to listen to what the women are saying, or he's got to be concerned with what the women are going to be saying. So that was the title of the book. If Men Have All the Power, How Come Women Make the Rules? And it was a bunch of bop, 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 disproving the idea that women don't have any power and that men have nothing but power. And it's been the most successful book I've ever written, which does not make me happy because it's sort of a peevish book. It's kind of like a sarcastic, wry. It's not a nice book, but it's the one that most men are responding to. And, it's sad because Goodwill Toward Men was a nice book and it really could have helped, but it got burned, so to speak.
And the second book, that's available on Amazon as well? Or is that hard copy?
Yeah, it's out there too. I also wrote a third book called Heroes of the Blue Sky Rebellion. And that's a book written for boys and young men. I just figured maybe 13 to 23 years of age. And it's a book that I wish I had been able to read as a young man. Basically, the idea was, gentlemen, young men, I think I have an idea how you're feeling. You're feeling that something just isn't fair here for boys and young men. You look around at what's going on with girls and young women and how it's you go girl. It's a 24/7 pep rally for go girl, go girl. What do girls here go, you go girl. What do boys here? Boy, don't go there. Don't go there. Shut up. Don't say anything. Don't say anything about how things aren't fair for you, because what you're going to hear is, oh, what do you have to complain about, as if men haven't ruled the world for 1,000 years? What's a boy going to do with that? Just get shut down. So I wrote a book that said, here's what you're facing. Since grown-up men aren't doing anything to help you, anything near what grown-up women are doing to help women and girls, young women and girls, since grown men are missing in action, probably afraid to speak up because they know how much power women really have, here's some things you can do yourself. And, I published that. I didn't even bother trying to find an agent to publish that one because I knew it wasn't going to get published. So I published it myself. It's on Amazon. It sells, I don't know, maybe 10 copies a year. I don't know, something cheap like that.
Gotcha.
So that's me. But look, I know you're going to give me a chance to promote what I am doing now. I can do that now, or I can wait until it comes up in your agenda.
Oh yeah, wait a little bit. We got one more small thing to do. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, we'll talk about the what you want to promote. But first, let's jump into First Thoughts. First Thoughts is brought to you in part by SRA Solutions, simple solutions for complex problems. For over 15 years, SRA Solutions has provided today's solution to prevent tomorrow's problem. SRA Solutions will provide you effective, efficient, robust, and reliable business intelligence, application website design, and PC support services. For more information, check out their website at www.sresolutions.org. Jack, you sound like you're very familiar with the way this is going to go. So,
well, I read it. I read your agenda, which was really good. You are really buttoned up in a good way.
I appreciate it.
You bet.
I appreciate it. People say I'm very structured and very anal about how I do things. I'm meticulous, very meticulous.
It works.
But for those listening and reviewing for the first time, like I always say, shame on you, but I'm happy you're here. First Thoughts is an opportunity for me to impulsively get the first thoughts of my guests by offering them a word or a phrase. They are not privy to this because obviously that would ruin the idea of first thought. So, Jack, are you ready for first thoughts?
Yes, sir.
All right. I try to start with a softball one, but I feel like after this conversation, it might not be as simple as that. But I legit figured this one out about 2 hours ago, the first one, because I try to find something really softballish. But this one popped in my head, and I said, I wonder what he's going to say about this. So, first thought, Clarence Thomas and Anita Hill. What's your first thought?
That we don't know. I don't know.
Okay. You are familiar with the whole Clarence Thomas and Anita Hill thing?
Oh, yeah. Okay. I know. I was riveted to the TV like just about everybody else. And the way I remember saying to my girlfriend at the time, I said, man, whoever just spoke is the person I'm believing. Mm. Because it was
it's kind of like ping pong back and forth, right?
Exactly. Yeah. When she spoke, you're like, wow, yeah, I can believe her. When he spoke, I'm like, wow, I can believe him. Yeah, so I don't know. And that's pretty much the way I feel about the Brett Kavanaugh and Blasey Ford hearings.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I don't know. I do know that I think the country believes that Blasey Ford was telling the truth and that Anita Hill was telling the truth, and nothing but the truth. I think that the marketing, the PR machines of Anita Hill and her allies, much better than the marketing and PR machine of Clarence Thomas. And I think the same is true of Blasey Ford and Brett Kavanaugh. I don't know. I don't know. Gotcha. I'd like to know, but I don't.
Yeah, it's one of those things, right? You wish you could be a fly on the wall, right? Just so you can actually know what the truth is.
Yeah.
But, they say there's one person's truth, another person's truth, and then somewhere in the middle is the actual truth. All right, so next first thought, let's talk about cancel culture. What's your first thought?
Well, having been a victim of cancel culture, with my book, Goodwill Toward Man, the first one, this was before being canceled was even a thing. Those of us in the men's movement who faced this problem, and we've been facing it for decades before the term cancel culture arose, we call it the lace curtain. It's the refusal of feminists to publish or allow to be published anything that disagrees with orthodox feminism. So cancel culture, I think it reminds me of people who want to hold their breath and turn blue. It's, spoiled brat, allowing something to be published doesn't mean you agree with it. I think that there is probably going to be a time in maybe 50 years, maybe if things are continuing in the way I think they're going to continue. There's going to be a time in 50 years when somebody whom we all admire now is going to have his name taken off of a building because it's going to be proven that he ate meat. And this is going to occur in an era when nobody eats meat. This man killed animals so he could eat them? That's barbaric. The point I'm trying to make is that, it wasn't so long ago that we were a species that was abiding by the law of the jungle. I mean, things were rough and mean and ugly, and it was kill or be killed. And people were marching around, Europe, and I'm going to take your your country. I'm going to take your castle. And cities were hunkering down behind stone walls. Things were mean and ugly. And we're still mean and ugly in a lot of ways. And, you know, to cancel somebody because they weren't perfect, I don't like it. I don't like it. And I guess, you know, the elephant in the room here is the founding fathers held slaves. How do we justify having the capital of our country named after a slaveholder? You know, I understand it's ugly, it's unfortunate, it's mean, it's sad, it's wrong. But he wasn't just a slaveholder. That's the way I feel about cancel culture. You know, just something about, I don't know if forgiveness is the right word, but understanding that everybody is a creature of their culture and the time in which they were alive. Mm-hmm. And, you know, looking at it today, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say real quick. I look at cancel culture as two things. One side of it is the side where people actually do or say, or there's some act that was done that is reprehensible, and there are repercussions to that. There's accountability associated with that, and it may result in them losing something or possessions, status, opportunity, whatever. And then there's the other side where there's something that happens negative based on no direct action, based on either a thought or a belief or a book. And those I kind of don't necessarily agree. I'm a firm believer there's no such thing as cancel culture. It's kind of a quirky term used to victimize a lot of situations that don't deserve to be victimized. But in some instances, there is a rebellion, if you will, against an idea or a person that results in them losing something. As opposed to what we're characterizing as cancel culture today, which is the victimization of everything. It seems like that doesn't go right. So I definitely get the book side, and I definitely get the, you know, I never really applied it to the founding fathers thing, which, you know, that could be something in the future. And I will tell you that probably the best illustration of the absurdity of some forms of rebellion, because again, I don't believe in cancel culture. The rebellion side is really the part that I don't like. I've never heard an example where years, centuries, decades, whatever from now, we're not eating meat anymore. Somebody who ate meat could be rebelled against because they at one time ate meat. I never heard that example, never even thought about it that outrageously, but it's 100% possible and plausible.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, it's intentionally a little bit far-fetched, but, you know, just to make the point that, you know, in this culture right now, we take animals and we kill them. Mm-hmm. We march them down a chute to where they get their throat slit. And the one behind sees what's happening to the one in front. And we do this every day so we can have hamburgers. Mm-hmm. You know, it's just not in an ideal world, we wouldn't do this, but we don't live in an ideal world. One other thing about cancel culture. I really do not like that aspect of cancel culture that is ready to cancel someone because they have been, quote unquote, credibly accused. Mm-hmm. They were credibly accused. And because they were credibly accused, and because Twitter is having a hissy fit, the university or the company that employs this person must let them go because they have become a distraction. You know, what better way to make sure we always have plenty of distractions than to let the distractors have their way just because they have credibly accused someone? What does that mean?
It's very arbitrary.
They didn't say, I'm lying while they're saying it. They just say, oh, well, this person raped me 14 years ago. Is that incredible? They're credibly accused. That's wrong. That's wrong.
Yeah. Gotcha. So last first thought, and we barely scratched the surfaces earlier, but fatherhood. What's your first thought?
The most underutilized natural resource in our country. I think this takes me back to something I think I was getting ready to say, and we got off track. It was back at the time I was saying that women like to say if they ran the world, there wouldn't be any wars. I'm willing to say I'm willing to give that a try. You know what I'd like? What else I'd like for us to try? Put men in charge of child rearing. Let men raise the kids. And I think we'd see a whole bunch of positive changes in what we see kids doing, thinking, feeling. I fatherhood is I mean, there's a reason that civilizations around the world have done pretty well with two parents raising a kid. And dismissing fatherhood as unnecessary. I mean, we talk about diversity all the time, right? So how much diversity is there in the parenting of a single parent? I mean, isn't none. So isn't there an easy way to introduce some diversity, another point of view, without having a ton of complexities, like with having a committee of 18 people be the parent, just one other person who might say, I understand what you're saying. I think I would like to try it this way. And then they come to an agreement where they say, okay, well, let's try it your way first. And if that doesn't work, then we'll try it my way. It's diversity. It's a very simple form of diversity. There is a male culture and there is a female culture, and there are male roles and there are female roles traditionally, and we've had thousands of years of those cultures being imbued in us, probably into our DNA and into our genes, that make us think in certain ways. Women tend to think maybe a little more this way. Men tend to think maybe a little more this way. And it's good to have both thoughts in our consideration of how to raise this child. Right now, I think that the women's way is dominating and the man's way is regarded like men are. Who cares? Disposable. I once asked a psychiatrist friend of mine, I said, in your experience as a psychiatrist, do you see any particular differences between your male patients and your female patients? He said, oh yeah, right away, he said. I said, well, what do you see? He said, women tend to focus on what people need. Men tend to focus on what people deserve. And my immediate thought was, well, isn't that the same thing? I mean, if you need it, you deserve it. And he said, no, just because you need it doesn't mean you deserve it. You deserve it because you earned it. And, it just makes so much sense. And it makes sense that women tend to, and I'm not saying it's 99-1, but, maybe it's 60-40. It makes sense that women have a predisposition toward taking care of what people need because they've got the breasts. They're going to be with the baby when it's brand new and is completely helpless. And if you focused only on what that baby deserved, it wouldn't get anything. Yeah. It'd be dead in 3 days. Yeah. On the other hand, if you focus only on what that baby needs, it will always be a baby. Because part of being an adult is not focusing on your needs, but focusing on the needs of others. So since I as the man am oriented towards deserving, let's talk about how you, young child of mine, can start deserving and preparing to be an adult so that you can take care of the needs of the next generation. They're both good. Both the male and female there are needed. But, calling men who have an idea about no, you don't get what you want just because you say everybody at school has it and you need it. No, you don't get it. Having that as part of the appreciation of maleness, I think could do wonders for our society.
Yeah,
but the situation right now is, men don't have a clue. They're dogs. They just want to watch football. They can't multitask. They're crude, rude. They just want to have sex. Why should we entrust our precious little children to those beasts? Now that might sound like a little bit of sexism, and if you said that, I would agree. And it runs deep. And I think that the primary reason that we have so much sexism against men is very similar to the reason we had so much sexism against women 50 years ago that was being talked about. And that's because men had the economy, a place where you could make money and have a career. And women said, hey, we'd like some of that. And men said, oh, well, we'd love to share it with you, but you can't do math, you cry too much, you can't make decisions, you just want everybody to like you, you just want to watch soap operas, you want to file your nails all day, go shopping and eat bonbons. And it's not your fault that that's the way you are, but that's the way you are. And so, no, you can't. It would be wrong for our economy to let you be in here and mess it up. Similarly, there are a lot of men who are looking at family life and saying, yeah, my job is okay, but that's not all I want in my life. I want some of what you got. I want to have a primary relationship with the kids. Oh, well, I'd love to share it with you, but you're a man and you just think about sex and you want to watch sports and you're clueless and you can't multitask and, on and on and on and on and on. Oh, and, and every chance you get, you're going to sexually harass somebody. Oh, and when you're changing the diaper, you might sexually abuse the baby. Crazy ideas, but, that are some of the ideas that are at work. It's why a lot of men who are in primary education, early childhood education, men are leaving early childhood education because they are afraid of the accusations that will be made against them on the basis of their sex. And, if anybody doesn't believe that, take a look at menteach.org. It's about getting men into early childhood education, and you'll see story after story of men saying, I had to get out. I was always under suspicion. So,
gotcha.
Yeah.
So that's the end of First Thoughts, and this season I started something new. We're turning over the power of the first thought to my guest in a segment we call Teal First Thoughts. Brainchild of that is my girlfriend, who actually came up with this idea, where my guests get an opportunity to offer me a first thought. So Jack, if you had to give me a first thought, what would it be?
Kids.
It's interesting. So while you were talking about fatherhood, one of the things I thought about was mama's boys versus daddy little girl, and the concept of those two ideas. And I thought about which one was the better influence, or the bigger, more powerful influence, right? Daddy's little girl or a mama's boy. And the connotations that come with mama's boy are usually typically always negative. Daddy's little girl, typically always positive. But to your question, my first thought with kids was, obviously I'd be a father. I couldn't be a mother that had a a mommy's little boy. But I would embrace the opportunity to have a daughter who's looked at as a daddy's little girl, because that gives me that intimate relationship that you're speaking about. And conversely, looking at the opposite side, a mama's boy, that to me says that the father's not there, or the father does not have that primary relationship. And so something like that, while the connotation standing on its own is negative, in the context of this relationship or this conversation we're having, it's extremely negative because there's no father there at all. And so my first thought about kids went that direction just because of what we're talking about. But alternatively, my first thought with kids are we really, society-wise, have to do a better job of raising our children so that they can be better than the generations before them. Because I feel like we're supposed to get better every generation. I don't feel like we actually are. And so that's probably my first thought when it comes to kids.
So you said you'd like to have the opportunity to raise a daddy's little girl.
Oh yeah. So my friends all say, just really quickly, my friends all say that if I have a daughter, it's over. She's wrapped around my finger. She's going to get everything, everything she wants and needs, not everything she deserves.
Yeah. I get that. I think I have a generally good feeling about daddy's little girls. Within reason, as long as he's not a complete chump. But making her feel like she's loved, no problem with that. So let me ask you this: imagine you have a little boy. Mm-hmm. You going to be able to kiss him? You going to be able to hug him? You going to be able to tell him you love him?
Absolutely. I could see myself doing nothing less.
So he's going to be daddy's little boy?
Yeah. My little man until he becomes a big man. Probably gets taller than me, but yeah, it'd be my little man.
Yeah.
And I think the important thing is to raise him that way as well.
How do you think you'd treat the boy and the girl different as you raise
them? I think after you get to a certain point there, and this is one of the things I've talked about one day when I have children, you'll get to a certain point where there's this split, right? Because, as your daughter gets older, there's another man that's going to come into her life. And as the boy gets older, he'll be looking to procreate, build a family. And so society-wise, we look at that way differently. The man is supposed to go out and find and build a family where a man is supposed to seek out a woman and get permission. Well, old school, get permission of her father and all that stuff. And so I think as we get into the teenage years, I can see my view of both of them and how they should lead their lives kind of diverging off in that sense. But to me, and I think this kind of goes to we got to get better every generation, where as they get older, we kind of squeeze at the divergentness a little bit. And if you're listening, you can't see what my hands are doing, but I'm kind of squeezing in the divergent past. But I think we've got to get to the point where we're not really separating them as they get teenagers. We're kind of identifying the ways that they're exactly the same. They can both build lives in the way that they want to. And one thing I will not be is an overpowering father. That's not me. It's just I view that type of thing as the number one way to drive your children away from you. So that's besides violence. So that's not something I would do at all.
Good for you. Good for you. So no kids for you yet?
None yet. I'm approaching. I'm already mid-40s. I'm approaching 50. So I'm hoping in the next couple of years, that's the plan, if you will. But you know how plans are.
Good for you.
They work or fit. Yeah.
Good for you. I bet you'll be a great dad.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, Jack. So that's the end of this segment. And as I always do before I let you go, I like to have my guests, if you want to talk about anything or promote anything, feel free to do so now.
Okay, good. So thank you. I really appreciate it, David. You've been a great interviewer, and you've got a great show. And I really like how buttoned up you are, and your agenda makes a lot of sense. So you're welcome. Thank you. So behind me, the background shows something called Medium. Do you know the Medium platform? It's an online platform it's an online platform for people who want to have an easy and convenient way to have a blog. And what's easy about it, especially that I like, is that for some blogging platforms, they'll give you the technology, a place to post your quote unquote content. I hate that word. But you got to go out and find your own readers. So you're always beating the bushes to try to get people to subscribe to your blog. Medium is different in that it's got hundreds of thousands of people who subscribe to it, pay $5 a month, and you don't have to have a $5 a month account, but you can have a free account. But not every story, not every post is free. Some are behind a paywall, and if you pay $5 a month, you can see the ones behind the paywall. But it's like it's an organization, it's a company, a platform with hundreds of thousands of readers who just like to read, and they're interested in new ideas. And when you post something on Medium, Medium will look at the keywords you've assigned to it, look at the keywords that its members have said they're interested in, and it'll have your story pop up. Not for every person who's mentioned your keyword, but it will pop up to people you don't even know, who don't know about you. And it's a really easy way to be able to focus on what you want to write without always having to think about, putting something on Twitter in the hope that maybe somebody will, follow you. It's just, it's writing without the marketing headache. Now, I shouldn't say you don't need to market and you can't market if you want to. There are plenty of people on Medium who are really good at marketing, love to do SEO and all of that stuff. I don't. So even though all I'm doing is writing and posting, publish, I'm getting a little traction, which feels good. So the profile that I publish under is my name, but I call it a seat at the table. A seat at the table for men and boys. And the idea is that feminism, when it started, the modern era, about 60 years ago, we were just getting also into an era of listening to each other and being respectful of each other and having partners in our businesses. We don't think of them as, vendors. These are partners. We listen to everyone. We want to talk to our stakeholders. We want to get as many points of view as we can. All of this lovey stuff, which I love all of it. The more points of view on an issue, the better. But at the same time, this was all going on. Feminism had a problem because a lot of men were saying, hey, this feminism thing sounds pretty good to me because it's about equality. And there are plenty of things that I don't feel like I'm your equal in. I might have an advantage in the job, but you've got the advantage in the family. And I'd like some of that. And so as men started saying, yeah, feminism's good and I'll support your goals in feminism, I'd like you to support mine. A lot of women were saying, wait a second, we can't be joining this feminist thing because look what it's making the men do. They want to get into my territory. I'm the mother. And so feminism had a problem. How was it going to be talking about fairness and equality between the sexes when half of that wasn't going to be in the immediate interests of the people we're trying to get to join feminism? So how do we avoid what we really should do by respecting men and asking them to be part of the movement? Well, the way we do that is that we make them the enemy. We make them the enemy. They are oppressors. It's patriarchal domination of women. Oppression of women and children. They even threw children in there just for good measure. Men are power hungry, lustful. They're bad to women. Therefore, we do not have to invite them to our table to our discussions, to our meetings, to the committees where these decisions are being made. You don't negotiate with your oppressor. You kill them. And I think that's basically been the approach of feminism over the past 50 years. I think it started out, really believing we were going to go for equality until it dawned on a lot of women, equality might not really be what I want, because as much as I want a job, I really want to be the mother. I really want to be the queen, the boss, the CEO of this family. And so men were excluded from the table. And Betty Friedan herself, in 1980, said, the dialogue has gone on too long in terms of women alone. Let men join women at the center of the second stage. So that's what I'm all about. Trying to give men and boys a seat at the table where these issues are discussed. And so that more and more men will feel entitled to say, yeah, I too want to have a seat at that table. And then eventually the discussion becomes balanced. And we don't just talk about what women need, we talk about what do women need that they also deserve, that also will work for everybody, including those terrible, terrible, terrible men that we see lurking in the hallway outside of our conference room.
And just one more time, what's the website?
It is, it's medium.com, and the URL for my profile on Medium is Male Friendly Media. All one word, no hyphens or anything. Male, M-A-L-E, Male Friendly Media .medium.com.
Gotcha. All right, Jack. I do want to thank you for taking time out to step into Dave's head, and I definitely appreciate the conversation. Very in-depth, thorough, mind thinking. Makes you think about a lot of different things from this conversation. So I definitely appreciate that.
It was a great show. Thank you.
My absolute favorite segment of my podcast is my GRIN, which stands for Great Reason to Be in Love with Now. Seasonal affective disorder, or SAD, is a type of depression. It happens during certain seasons of the year, most often fall or winter. It's thought that the shorter days and less daylight may trigger a chemical change in the brain, leading to symptoms of depression. Now, the body naturally makes more melatonin when it's dark. I could use some, by the way. So when the days are shorter and darker, more melatonin is made. SAD also affects women more so than men. I didn't dive into the reasons why, but I would love to check that out, or if you have any information on that, feel free to share. Now, some of the treatments for SAD, or again, seasonal affective disorder, more exposure to sunlight, light therapy, psychotherapy, and even antidepressants, let's not do that, are used to treat SAD. Now, when SAD occurs, sometimes it's important to focus on the happy and happiness that's in your life. HappierHuman.com has an article entitled 7 Reasons Why It's Important to Focus on Your Happiness. I'll go through them really quickly. In relation to seasonal affective disorder and depression, if you're suffering from that, one of the ways I think, or these 7 things we're going to go through to get through that, get past that, are focusing on the good or the happy that's in your life. The first one they say is happy people are more successful. Now, I attribute that to an attitude thing. They also attribute it to happy people in the workplace. Now, we are more in a remote environment. There's a lot of people that work from home, partially, if not completely. I'm one of those people. And so your happiness when you're in a work from home environment is mainly solely driven by you. Now, you may have interaction with coworkers, meetings, those types of things, but depending on the type of interaction you have with your coworkers, it could be very structured. Here's a meeting, that's the end. It could be very cordial, very lighthearted. Depends. But majority of the day, unless you're in meetings, you are interacting with your role responsibilities as an employee of your company. And so Being happy may lead to you performing better at work, but it'll also make for your work from home experience to have that even better. Number 2, they say happy people maintain better relationships. I would tend to agree with that. I think if you aren't happy with yourself, it's hard to be happy with someone else. Some people say you have to heal yourself before you get into a relationship, which is very true. Going into a relationship as an unhappy person will not lend to a successful relationship. Whether it's work relationship, friendships, work relationships, being unhappy here, pointing to my heart, my chest, you, does not allow for you to put that happiness outward, to share that happiness with your partner, to share that happiness with your employees or coworkers. Happy people maintain better relationships because they're able to spread their happiness. And different things that happen in those relationships don't instantly impact them in a negative way because they have that happiness buffer. Not to say it doesn't bother them, but if you're happy, you can come down. But if you're already down, it's kind of pressing at that point. Number 3, which I think relates to number 2, might even relate to number 1. You'll see it might relate to the next ones coming forward. Happy people have less stress. I think that's a duh. I think if you are a happy person, you are stressing less than people who aren't happy. Your relationships are better and probably less stressing. Your work may be more enjoyable. And if not, you have the tools to go find other employment. And so having less stress in your life leads to better relationships, leads to more success, leads to better relationships, networking, and so much more. Business-wise, if you have your own business, being happy allows you to better serve your clients. Less stress is just important, period. And I think number 4 definitely directly relates to number 3. Happy people live longer lives. I think that's a duh moment as well. Excluding all externals, right? Car crash accidents, heart attacks, those types of things. But generally, happy people, less stress on the body. Your body's able to function more smoothly. Happy people live longer lives. One of my sayings that I probably have said 1,000 times just this year, you should enjoy life because life should be fun. That's a statement saying live happy so that you actually can enjoy the time that you're here. Number 5, happy people are more creative. I interpret it this way. If you're sad, depressed, shut down, your creativity is restricted, finite, right? You don't have the ability to think past that moment, to think creatively, whether an artist or not, because you're dealing with this overwhelming sadness. If you're happy, the possibilities open up. The creative juices are more there. You're dancing in the shower. You're singing in the mirror. You're doing so many things as a happy person. You're doing the dumbest things that you would never share video of with anyone when you're happy. Think about it. You might have made up a dance or a song that you would never sing or never do in front of anybody when you're happy. And so you can be more creative when you're happy. Number 6, I think it kind of goes along with almost everyone above that, especially 3 and 4. Happy people are healthier. You don't binge eat. You don't grab a huge pizza, sit there with beer and liquor and binge eat and binge drink until you pass out. You don't smoke cigarette after cigarette. And please stop smoking cigarettes, people. But you don't smoke cigarette after cigarette when you're happy. You don't take risks, driving too fast, weaving in and out of traffic. Now, there are some people out there who are saying, Dave, do you know how you drive? I do. I drive safe, though. I just get where I'm going. But you're healthier in your movements when you're happy. You're healthier in what you do throughout your day when you're happy. And that in turn makes you more healthy. The last one I find interesting, how they made this correlation. And the more I thought about it, it kind of makes sense. Happy people are more generous. Think about this. I'm bringing you all into my world. I'm making you all me. We don't like when Jehovah's Witnesses come knock on the door on Saturday or during the day. Because during COVID, they were just coming during the day, which was interesting. But like every day. None of us like to be woken up early Saturday morning where we actually get a chance to sleep in and Jehovah's Witnesses are at the door with a pamphlet and a speech. None of us like it. However, if we're happy, we'll be really pleasant with them. I'm sorry. I'm not religious, but thank you. Oh, yes, sure. I'll take that. Thank you very much. Have a great day. Be safe. As opposed to if we're not happy, I'm not going to say what possibilities there are, but there's a lot of possibilities for how you interact when you open that door. Or you just lay in bed and said, fuck them. They can freeze. Seriously. Those are different options that you have when you're pissed off. Maybe I've done that once or twice. But you tend to donate if you go to events, right? The trade comes around, or say people that go to church. When you're happy on Sunday, you might take something out your pocket and throw it in there. If you go to a charity event, maybe you're just trying to get out the house, but you're not donating. You're not supporting anything. You're not doing a silent auction. You're not doing any of this stuff because you just wanted to get out of the house. You're not thinking about where you're actually at. You're just trying to get away from your spouse, which is why they weren't with you that night. But if you go out and you're happy, say you bring your spouse to this charity event. Hey, babe, you got a 10 on you? Hey, babe, you got a 20 on you? Or whatever. Let me get this raffle. You're just in a better giving mood. You open an email up and you see your university, your alumnus of a university. They send you something. Hey, it'd be great to have a donation of $10 from you. Or one of the 3,000 other emails you get about donations every year. When you're happy, you might, and you got a nice, happy little advertisement or solicitation, you might be more than willing. And so I kind of agree with that. Happier people are more generous. Think about this. If you're walking on the street and you see a homeless person on the street, are you more inclined to drop something in their cup, drop something in their hat? If you're in a good mood, or are you in a bad mood? Just think about it. One thing that I like that they say at the end of this article, and I will give them credit. It's not me, but I love the quote. Happiness is the most important experience we want for those we love, including ourselves. Seasonal affective disorder, or SAD, can rob many people of that period of time during the year, which, by the way, the fall foliage is beautiful, of enjoying that type of stuff, enjoying the first snow or the first frost. Now, granted, darker in the morning, earlier darkness at night, that can bring people down, make you unmotivated, make you sad. Remembering what's important to you, your happiness, and why, what you should be happy for, can be the key to getting past those sad moments. Can be key to not losing your positive attitude, the good days, and the happy life. Check out the website, happierhuman.com. They have so many more articles that are beneficial to you to just read. But check out this one, 7 reasons why it's important to focus on your happiness. For more details than I gave about those 7 things. Being more successful, better relationships, less stress, longer lives, more creative, healthier, and more generous. I want to thank Jack Kammer for stepping into Dave's head. And I'll say this. I did not expect that conversation. And so, like I've said throughout the season, I've been booked for a lot of these guests for a long period of time. Booked up my season way earlier this year. When I did my background on the booking, I kind of circled this one as one I thought would be very, very polarizing. That might even be somewhat combative. But Jack made some very valid points. And when you get into the crux of what he's saying, there's not a lack of truth there. But there are different sides to that story, right? There's different interpretations to that story, different ways that those things, the difficulties in society can change and need to change. And obviously men and women are going to look at this very much differently. But I think from this conversation, there's a lot of things that they're going to look at exactly the same. Check out his website, www.malefriendlymedia.com or malefriendlymedia.medium.com. You can find them on LinkedIn, Male Friendly Media, or YouTube, the Masculism channel. Again, the Masculism channel. Support our sponsors, Digga Movers, for all your safe and swift moving needs, local and long distance moving services. And SRE Solutions for all your PC support, antivirus, network runs, and all types of stuff, including website designs. Check them out at www.sresolutions.org and Digga Movers at www.diggamovers.com. I think I forgot to say that. If you're interested in sponsoring on Dave's Head, reach out to me on any of my social media and we can make it happen. So first, getting rid of sexism and happiness. All great reasons to be in love with now. That's all for this episode of Dave's Head. New episodes released on the second and fourth Friday of the month. For all things Dave's Head, check out our website at daveshead.card.co. Subscribe to watch new episodes on YouTube or Spotify video, or to listen via your preferred podcast player, go to anchor.fm/Dave's Head Pod. Thank you for watching or listening. As always, enjoy life, because life should be fun. Take care.